This is the future. Evolution. This is the future. Evolution.
Hey.
Hey,
We're back. There, now we're better.
Did that show the whole video?
What's that?
Did that show the whole video? I just saw the lock and key.
Yeah, it showed the whole thing.
Okay, cool. Well,
yeah, it did. And we're live.
We are live. And for everybody looking at good old BMR, it's kind of different for BMR. I'm a pirate sporting cheater glasses because I am using my phone. My computer took a crap 2 days ago. It's not coming in until Thursday. And I can't see anything on this phone. You know, I'm a little uncomfortable because I can't see. I can see a little bit, first time, no microphone, no headphones. I can hear myself reverberating in the background. However, the show must go on. Huh?
You're just a hot mess.
I'm a hot mess.
Yeah.
So I can't see anybody in the chat room. So, although I did put up my, I bought this laptop back in year 2000. So I got that kind of fired up that I can look at and kind of see everybody a little bit. So thanks and hello to everybody for coming on in.
Yep, absolutely. We got a conference coming up.
Huh?
We have a conference coming up.
We do, don't we?
We do, in September.
September 19th and 20th.
Yeah, you want me to bring up the thing and I can
read it? You know what? You got the controls. I can't do anything.
Okay, I got it. I got you here.
Yeah. I can't read that.
September 19th and 20th this year at the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. We have Josh Hurd, Heather Mosier, Small Town Monsters, Will Lunsford, Lady Ann Celine, Ron Murphy. They're going to be talking about fairies and the fae. Woo. And then we have Dr. Dean Bertram. We have Greg Ogles, Frankie Cambalata, Dan Klein. They're bringing the haunted car. Sir Brian Bowden, Miguel Ramirez from Sasquatch Theory. And we added Martin Groves, which I need Jason to add him on here and give us the new poster because this one doesn't have Martin Groves on it yet. But then we have our special guest is Ken Gerhard, Dana Stricker, Brent Thomas, Ryan Edwards, Mike Familiant, Chris Garitano, Linda Eastburn, and David Glidden. And it's hosted by the whole party of misfits.
Yes, it is.
So it's
going to be a fun event. And of course, as you mentioned, we have the ghost hunt going on.
Yep, we do. That is sold out. However, and I have been slacking. I've had a death in the family, and so I've been dealing with that. But I will get to it. Kathy, the curator of the Ray County Museum, since the ghost hunt sold out so fast, she is going to do 2 ghost tours during the day on that Saturday that people will be able to sign up for. So just give me time to get it onto Eventbrite.
Very good. Yep. Awesome. And before we bring up our fabulous guest, we have Tobe Johnson joining us. We'll be talking a little Bigfoot, some paranormal, what he has going on. And for everybody that's new coming into the chat or listening elsewhere in the world, please subscribe to Bigfoot Mission Rob on YouTube, The Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube, Texas Front Porch on YouTube, Paranormal Paul, Monica Rollins, Our Paranormal World, Donnie Show said, Truth or Tinfoil. Thank you. And everybody, to buy my books, I have 2 books on Amazon. Type Bigfoot Mystery Rob in your Amazon browser. leave a review. It does help promote sales. And super chats are open. You can become pirates. You can become a pirate with glasses. That's right. Join today, mateys. Join the many. Join the few. Depends on your point of view. Yeah, get a picture of me sporting a bandana in the chat room. That's what you get. That's what you get.
There you
So
go.
we got that all the way.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Josh Casto says he went to his grandmother's funeral today.
Sorry, Mr. Castro.
Yes, it was my cousin that passed away, and he was more like a brother to me than a cousin. So this one's hit hard for me. So anyway,
Yeah.
we got some good things to talk about, though.
We do.
We do. Are you ready?
I'm ready. You got the controls, my friend.
Tobe looks ready to me.
Sounds
All right.
good.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
How are
Tobe.
Thanks for doing this. Let's have some fun.
Well, thank you for coming on. Appreciate that. Krista appreciates it.
Krista, nice to see you again.
Yeah.
BMR.
Nice to see you. Yeah. Your partner in crime, I think she's wonderful, Miss Jill.
I know. What am I going to do here without my crazy half?
You know?
Snyder.
Well,
Yes. She's fantastic.
we'll take care of you.
Okay,
It'll be
good.
nice. It'll be a good flow.
Go easy on me, BMR.
Yeah.
That's
No. You don't have to worry about me. It's Krista. She has all the tough questions.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Let me get my pen handy.
Can I answer one little question really quick before we get the show rolling? I don't have to type it all out there. Little Patty asked Krista, so Paying at the Door is out in Richmond. Little Patty, if you want to come and walk through the vendors, all the speakers and special guests, that is all free. You don't have to pay diddly squat for that. If you want to get in to see the speakers, if you want to pay at the door, look me up. There we go.
Sweet.
Very nice. So, Tobe, as I told you backstage, I had a nice bio you sent me. Just goes through your walk from getting involved with all this paranormal Bigfoot activity. If you'd like, for people that are maybe they don't know who you are or anything about you, why don't you walk us through that, where you got started, and we'll get this puppy started.
Okay, BMR. Let's see here. So, this was always in the back of my mind growing out here in the Pacific Northwest. It's just one of those things that you think about is what goes bump in the night, especially if you sit around a campfire with your uncle. And if they're any good at telling ghost stories, they're probably pretty good at telling Bigfoot stories. So I grew up with that happening in the shadow of these giant Doug firs out here. And mainly in the Cascade Valley of a little town called Springfield, Oregon. And that's kind of where everything started for me, outside this little mill town. And fast forward to around 2005, I ended up finding my son ended up finding a single muddy footprint walking into the blackberry brambles. And this got a conversation between a 4-year-old and myself about what if. And it was just that idea of bonding with my son at a young age with this campfire mystery that I grew up around. And this was his first real experience with the what if factor, the tall tale, the mystery of the Pacific Northwest. So all we did was we had, was at the young age of smartphones. And I had, a little hiking whistle, sat it by the track. And then I put a scale object there so we could show size, and took a photo. And that was kind of it. But it got this conversation started with my son and I about, well, what if these things actually, exist? This is probably a hoax, but let's see if we can find somebody that has seen a Bigfoot in town. And it just so happens that a lot of people have seen Bigfoot, and not only in the little town of Springfield, Oregon, but everywhere around the world. And this was just such an easy thing to talk about as a joke, mainly, right? But this is also something that changes people's lives forever. It is a transformational issue and has huge implications to the point where it changes their worldview. Now that's we have the two worlds colliding here, just like people want to have, a conversation about something fun and speculative and jokey. But what about these other people? And so these are the kind of people that I met during the first 12 months of looking at it. And that was just, that really was interesting to me because it was the people that were having transformative issues about, being a witness to Sasquatch that really got me in the investigation side of things, and not so much like what Bigfoot looks like and the implications of their footprints, but what it was doing to these people's lives. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where the idea of like Jill Remensnyder and Brett and the Flash of Beauty team really was interesting to me, because they were looking at it from kind of like a sociological perspective, a philosophical perspective of what goes on in people's minds. And so that was fascinating to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You there, BMR?
Yeah, I could hear. I was just listening intently here and trying to adjust my ears to the little phone here. I am
Gotcha.
Out in the Pacific Northwest. Is that more accepted? Like I've never been. If you walk into a small town or perhaps even a bigger city, and you mention Sasquatch, Bigfoot, is that more? Do you not get sun like you would here in the state of Michigan or New Jersey?
Well, see, now, I don't know. I've never been out in your neck of the woods, mainly because of the chiggers. But we've got as many chiggers as you got. We might have Bigfoots, but I don't know. You guys got Sasquatch too, and those might be an issue. I don't know if you can spray for Sasquatch, but so yeah, like this is like we had like Bigfoot beverage company out here. We've got Bigfoot mattress company. Everybody's hopped on board. I mean, mainly what did it right was Monster Quest. When Monster Quest came along, I don't know what happened, but it just set everybody on fire with Bigfoot fever. And it was the first big show that made Bigfoot kind of cool, maybe cool again. It took a big break during the 80s, really. I mean, there wasn't much going on. A lot of low budget B renditions of, Sasquatch slaughterhouse type stuff. But, this is not at all what the Pacific Northwest Native American First Nation people said about Bigfoot, right? Like when I started asking about Bigfoot, this beautiful woman by the name of, she was an elder here out of the Kalapuya, Esther Stutzman. She pulled me aside and said, "Listen, young man, before you go looking for this giant Bigfoot in the woods, just know that what you're looking for here, there's consequences for what you're looking for, and you shouldn't even talk about it. You're talking about it in the wrong time of the year. You should talk about it in the spring or the fall, not this time of the year." So there was all these implications of like taking your time looking at the cultural perspective of what you're getting into. And they all had different perspectives on what Sasquatch was, but none of them really that I talked to back at least in my little town of Springfield, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, the Cascade area, all the way through, the eastern slope of the Three Sisters Wilderness. The Native Americans all said that there was this supernatural paranormal link, that these beings walked between two worlds. They were not just a physical thing like a coyote or a bear or a salmon. They were given reverence at the bottom of the totem pole, the most powerful spot to place, an animal, or in this case, like a hairy tribal member of some kind, a lost tribal member, maybe another way to look at it. But there was all these supernatural components to what Bigfoot was.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And, my thinking, you talked about all the different little components, my camp, I used to be flesh and blood camp. I'm no longer flesh and blood camp anymore. However, my Bigfoot encounter, what I encountered was 100% flesh and blood for that time. But I've been out in the woods and I have seen things like orbs and things like that that leads me to believe otherwise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in fact, excuse me, it was the orbs.
Mm-hmm.
The new term that everyone's using is plasmoids, but these are UFOs, really. Like, this is no different than what people describe seeing as far as these Foo Fighters, or what Kenneth Arnold described out here in Mount Rainier. These are unexplained balls of light, spirit lights that have this organic quality that seem to have consciousness because they follow you. And they are absolutely in Bigfoot territory. In fact, one of the early things that we called orbs was they seemed to be like the business cards of Bigfoot. Like, they were just passing them out, and that's how you knew Bigfoot was going to come around next, is that you're going to see either this little flash of white or blue, generally not red, because red has connotations to there being like a little bit more something going to happen. Orange and red seem to be indicative, like, oh, there's a party about ready to let loose out here in the woods. But the little flashes of white, almost like if people can just imagine like a gnome out there flicking a Zippo lighter, something small but unexplainable, right? Not like a little glowworm or something like that. We don't have lightning bugs, by the way, out here in Washington. And these are happening in rainstorms. These are happening at all times of day and night. And then you have these giant balls of light, some as big as like a beach ball, or like maybe like a softball size. And they're just gliding, right? Like, they're just gliding through the woods. And then you have your Bigfoot encounter. Well, this is no problem for the First Nations people. I mean, generally, this is what the oral tradition is talking about, is how Sasquatch walks between two worlds. And it seems to be related to the Star People.
Yeah. So you talked about the orbs. So when I was at Land Between the Lakes, my very first time, it was the middle of winter, and it was a couple of years ago. I actually saw a red orb about the size of a beach ball. It wasn't just myself that saw it, it was several others. There was like 10 of us there. But after that, we didn't see a Bigfoot. However, we were all sitting around a fire, and we could hear something coming up behind us. There wasn't any squirrels, there wasn't any deer. We'd shine our lights and there was nothing there. But it sounded like as big as you and I walking through the woods. So it was a crazy, crazy experience. And that's why I think, like, a lot of these creatures, these Bigfoot, like you said, I think there is more to them than the flesh and blood.
Yeah. Great point, Chris. Tobe, what you're talking about is, how do you walk that path? Okay, for example, what I saw was flesh and blood, but it also reminded me of something paranormal, is the events that led to the end of my encounter. Now, since I've been doing this for several years now, I've spoken with people, with First Nations people, that have the high reverence, and a lot of them is a spiritual thing. But then you talk to these staunch Aper camp, they're just the Aper camp. And as long as I've been doing this now, some of these folks have blinders on, and I don't think they're open-minded enough to recognize that there's something much more than, it's not an ape running around. So when you've come across people, or even yourself, and even for me to this day, it's so hard for me to differentiate between both, even though I'm more on the paranormal side. Do you ever come across that with people you come across with in the field, or when you do your shows?
Well, we live in a weird time now. I mean, had I found that Bigfoot track with my son yesterday compared to 2004 or 5, whenever we found it, it'd be a lot easier to migrate in between these two worlds, because now you go to these conferences and they're filled with just, a whole cavalcade of different type of people with different experiences on what's going on with Bigfoot, because there's ghost hunters there's UFO investigators there. Everyone's got a vendor table now. It wasn't like that back then.
Mhm.
And they were so siloed, right? Like it just like you were in the crazy camp, and I was okay going, into this crazy camp kind of earlier than most of them, because these guys seemed to have a smile on their face. There was this lightheartedness to a lot of these researchers, because they weren't really looking for evidence, and they were having experiences, and they were having them repeatable, and there seemed to be, like they just basically Henry Franzoni, right? God bless his heart, passed away last year. Pretty, amazing researcher in our film. He said, go to the place that has the crazy names. This is what his book, Spirit of Seatco, is about. He's just like, if you, go to an atlas or Google Maps and you find a place that sounds like a scary land or a scary lake or a scary hill, that's where you're going to have an experience, most likely. And so just stay there. Don't go looking for anything. Just kind of hang back on your tailgate for as long as you can, for 3-4 days with a friend that you have a good time with. And there you'll have an experience. And that's what we did, right? We went to Skookum Creek, and that's where we saw these lights. Then I had other researchers that weren't, they were early adopters of this quantum theory, people like Ron Moorhead. They were saying, embed yourself. Actually, it was not only Ron, but it was Autumn Williams and her mother, Sally Shepard Walford, in her book, Valley of the Skookum, that said, if you gain the trust of a habituator, that was the early term they used back then. I call these people like Sasquatch contactees, because it's so much like having a UFO experience that you can't really separate the two. So if you find someone that is a contactee with this phenomena and you gain their trust as a family, I'm talking about humans now, and they have experiences happening on their property and they let you study and research it, that's the best thing you can hope for, because now you have a controlled area, private property, that they've allowed you to come to 24/7, perhaps when they're not home, go to their private hill, and this is what really changed it for me, was the ability to be honest enough with people and have them trust me enough to where they just said, come look. We don't know what's going on, but if it's what we think we are, we don't know what to do. Confirm what we think is happening. And some of these things were quite scary. Like one of the first contactees I spoke with was a husband and wife that had a family full of kids and were raising pit bulls. So there was a lot going on there. Only the pit bulls were cowering at night in the back of the kennel. And if anybody knows dog behavior, especially that variety, it's pretty hard to get a pit bull to cower anywhere. And this is what was being described. And between them and some unconfirmed, well, it was very confirmed actually, but the two neighbors didn't know one another. The pit bull farmers and this other guy named Earl Kelso, they were separated by 2 double wide trailers. And they both were saying that they had action in the back of the property on this hill, only they didn't know each other. And so now I have the privilege from both of these people of researching. And it was really that place in the little town of Vida, Oregon, where everything became quite obvious to me that this was supernatural in nature. And to your point, it was really the orbs, seeing these giant balls of light in proximity to having my tent moved 49 feet and stuck in a tree. Now, that moment right there, seeing these giant balls of light and flashes of light and having my tent move 49 feet and stuck in top of a tree 8 feet up, and then finding giant scat, giant footprints, having something run up behind me and stop within inches of my back in the middle of the summer, it was very obvious something was very different than a haunting. It had elements of a poltergeist or a haunting of some kind, but this all smacked back to what the First Nations people said to me. There's this part in our film where Native American TJ Ravenwell says, forgive us for speaking so plainly about you. Listen, this is the thing, is that like we're talking about this stuff so casually, but this is like the implications of what we're talking about are so big, probably so top secret that this is why there's so much speculation about what's going on with Bigfoot. Is it's so intertwined with stuff like UAPs, UFOs, all this stuff going on that as far as disclosure. This is just one more of these unbelievable layers, and it's super ancient. It goes back way farther than these First Nation stories I got. This goes back to like the 13th century in France. And, you know, why would that be? You know, this is an incredible mystery that we're looking at.
Yep.
You know, Krista knows where I'm going with this when you mentioned Ron Moorhead and quantum theory. I've had him on a couple times on the show, and when we were talking backstage before the show, we were talking about Bigfoot and paranormal and UFOs, aliens, flesh and blood, this, that, and the other. And then it came up to me, he said, you know, Rob, if 30 years ago, if you came up to me as a young man and asked me about, quote unquote, the woo, you know, the woo, no one likes the term the woo, but it's thrown out there, simply the term for paranormal, supernatural, right? If you'd have mentioned the woo back then, Rob, I'd have turned you around and said, young man, you know, go find somebody else to talk to. And so he says, Rob, 30 years later, I'd have that discussion with you today, because what he's experienced and now how he has become open-minded, he's not a man with blinders. He brings up the orbs. He even thinks, Tobe, that Bigfoot, Sasquatch could be alien. He thinks maybe they've come down from craft. At the same time, he still believes that there is a physical being that have these elements of the supernatural, the paranormal. And of course, he writes in his book, The Quantum Bigfoot, Ron Moorhead, which I read ad nauseum, fantastic book. It pulls it all together for me. And that's why today, if somebody asks me, Rob, flesh or blood, paranormal, I say both.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, no, I totally agree. You know, I was invited along with Brett Eichenberger and Jill Rimmensnyder and Michael Ferry of The Flash of Beauty to join their production team as a co-producer back in 2018. And there was just this camaraderie between us, you know, me not as a filmmaker, but as someone who's ingratiating themselves into the Bigfoot world. And Brett and Jill had kind of done that already on their own. They didn't really need me, but I knew some of these extended experiencers or these contactees to a degree that I kind of set them up with interviews. And luckily, Ron was a neighbor in the little town of Springfield, Oregon. He was one of the first people in 2009 that I invited to speak at a conference in Eugene, Oregon. Wow. And so we would go camping together, or we would have dinner together and talk about where Ron's theories had come along. But the point was that Ron actually called us up to do his film, to do his book as a documentary, Voices in the Wilderness. So we actually got back last September from the Sierra camp. Wow. And spent 5 days up at 8,000 feet elevation on horseback at Ron's camp, right? Well, you know, one of many people went to that campus as well as Ron. And this story, I can't give too much away, but it's coming out in 2025 this year. And it will tell such a strange story about what happened in the high Sierras. It probably will change. I mean, it definitely will change the perspective and the importance of what happened at the Sierra camp, because it's so much more than language that these men experienced up there. But that's a huge component of it. And what Ron was saying early on, I mean, he was really the only person out there saying that these things have a language. Right. You know, and along comes Scott Nelson and Dr. Curlin. And, you know, he brought Peter Byrne up there. He brought Joe Hauser from the Montana Vortex up there. There were people up there since the 1950s at that camp before Ron got up there. I believe, in the early 70s. So that's a 20-year difference of experiences happening there. Those interviews we got on film about who those men were in that shelter, because that place had action going on.
Right.
And but the language component is so important, because the way Scott Nelson put it is perfect. He says, there is no, and we should just remind people, Scott Nelson is a Navy cryptolinguist. He's
Yep.
helping Ron look at these sounds as provable as an unknown language. And he has this whole Sasquatch phonetic alphabet that he's done, the SPA. And but he says, there is no evidence of language without culture. So that's a big first step, right? If they have language, then we're talking about people. We're talking about a type of peoples, because they do have. There's no examples of language without culture. And you talk to anybody who's had experiences on their property. This is a culture. Absolutely, they have a sense of humor. They leave you gifts. We can go down the road of gifting and what that could possibly mean.
Right.
But they seem to have some kind of language that they spell out, alphabet of some kind, or sigil, or what people would call stick Latin. And these are all huge things to get into. But most baseline researchers, they're so happy to find a footprint. They're so happy to chase down something with a FLIR camera. And I get it, but man, it goes way deeper if you let it.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get into that a little bit about the gifting. What's your thoughts on the gifting?
Good minds think alike, but that's on my notes. Yeah.
And before you give your answer, I've spoken with many of people about gifting, and some Bigfoot habituate on their property, in their wood line, back in the woods where they live. Some talk about it being a very pleasant, great experience. And then there are the others that stop the gifting. Then they start having those small little problems start coming up around their house. Maybe their farm animals come up missing. Maybe there's strange knocking on the side of their house, which kind of sends the message to me that the Bigfoot got aggravated and this is their way of taking out on them. So that's my little take. What's been your experiences with the folks you've spoken with, or your thoughts?
Right. Well, we dealt with it firsthand. We'll get into this place now. Between 2005 to 2018 is this guy, basically an ambulance chaser for Bigfoot activity. I'm getting there too late. I'm having phenomena happen. It seems as though it's very poltergeist related, or related to UFO activity, orbs, invisible things kind of walking behind you, strange lights in the woods, that kind of stuff. So in 2018, I was invited to research this little farmhouse in Cottage Grove, Oregon. And this is what we get into in Flash of Beauty, this place that we ended up calling the Owl Moon Lab. And at the Owl Moon Lab, everything under the sun happened, but it all started with Bigfoot. And it was one of these power spots that exist all over the world. Now, why this place? I don't have any idea, but everybody was talking about the phenomena in and around this little parcel of land underneath the Umpqua National Forest. So between the I-5 corridor, which is the giant north and south corridor that goes all the way from Mexico to Canada, one giant strip of tarmac, is a bunch of hills and a bunch of wildlands that are separated by maybe the Bonneville power line, but not much else. There's reservoirs. So we're here in the Umpqua National Forest between the freeway and the Pacific Ocean. And there's probably a good, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes of dirt road before you ever see anybody else. And so this little farmhouse was getting all sorts of activity before the property owners moved up there. Daryl Adams and Cindy Adams, the Adams family. And so just like the Adams family, man, everything everything you can imagine started to unfold, and we were getting confirmation of it not only from our address, our zip code, our front door, but from the rancher over on the hill, maybe 400 yards away from us, a guy that we called Wormy because he was a fertilizer farmer. We were getting confirmation from the single mother in the yurt. And so what were these people saying? Well, they were saying, I had this blue-eyed bear on two legs advance on me. And that's a pretty darn strange thing to say, especially, when they say the eyes were glowing blue, not reflective, and that it advanced on them on two legs. The single mother in the yurt would say that something was throwing pine cones at her back window. Then other people would talk about something crawling on the ground over by the lake with glowing blue eyes. They'd talk about seeing strange lights below the tree line following them and kind of like flashing at them. They said a drone is taking pictures of them at night. And so they're putting these, you see what I'm saying here is they're putting these things that they can deal with, a bear, a drone, a big spider crawling by the lake. They're using things that they can deal with instead of saying, how strange it really is. Well, we weren't bashful about it. Daryl Adams was a recent retired contractor, construction worker from LA. He moved up to Cottage Grove, Oregon to retire with his wife, Cindy. And as soon as we started to have activity, he basically invited me to come move in on the property and study the property full time as kind of like this living laboratory. And so that's what we did. And as soon as I was a truck driver back then, so I would be working like at 2 a.m, getting these strange texts and phone calls from Daryl while I'm truck driving, and it'd say things like, hey, this weird thing ended up on the doorstep. It looks like a hip bone to a deer. It wasn't there the night before. It's old looking. It's not fresh. Pretty strange to find up in front of your door. But the incremental activity of gifts and the oddness of where they were found, it seemed to ramp up. And so this is what people describe is strange gifts that end up in odd places that can't be, right? Like, and they all have a weird kind of patina on them, almost as though they've kind of been stowed somewhere for long periods of time. And these kind of things started turning up more and more around the property. And I had been doing this for a while. So I said, Daryl, I think you're getting gifted by the phenomena here. What do you want to do next? Because if you want to have some fun, we could gift back. But see, like this gets into what you're saying, BMR, is just like once you start gifting back with these things here, you're opening a whole can of worms, especially if you start leaving out food. And food is a whole different game than leaving out shiny little, marbles or pennies or whatever you're going to do as far as like the before and after effect of gifting. When you leave out food, there's an expectation of like, this is a calorie intake here. This is way more beneficial for all of us here. And I think that might be the point where things get a little confusing between them as far as food is. And that would make sense, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I can see the difference between giving a marble, maybe a doll, a feather, a rock. But you put out a jar of Skippy peanut butter, there's no going back. And I guess I'm sounding funny, but I think the end result isn't funny at all.
Well, it can be fun. I mean, we never had anything dastardly happen. Daryl. I mean, we're going to skip around here a lot from the initial uptick of the Al Moon Lab, which was basically like a half acre of property. It had a small front yard, and a pear tree up front, and then my little tiny camper trailer and my aluminum boat parked out front. And everything was gravel in the front except for this little tiny patch of front yard with a pear tree on it. And everything in the back was covered by a T-post deer fence and like a gate, like, you know, just a regular like swinging gate. And then there was this giant metal shop that separated my trailer from the main house. And there's nothing in this metal shop except these plaster impressions that we found of these giant knee impressions up in the woods that we cast. You know, this is a whole part of the story here. We don't have to get into it, but one of the first things that we found was Good Friday, 2018, were these two divots in the red clay. And we talk about that in the film of what these divots in the red clay were. Well, you see us extract hair. We end up sending this hair off for analysis. The hair comes back as anomalous, nothing in the data bank. And it's plus or minus 1,400 pounds to make these impressions. And it seems to show a knee, maybe two knees. Maybe it's the same knee twice. We don't know, but you can see the patella. You can see the hair flow. You can see weight distribution. It's extremely fresh when we found it, like very fresh. So when we cast those, you know, a 50-pound bag of plaster, casting these whole knee impressions, letting them dry, you know, till 2 a.m. It was underneath the full moon, also known as the owl moon, where we brought these impressions down to this garage. So this is where this name came from, is these knee impressions. And as soon as we brought those knee impressions down to Daryl's house and let them dry out in the garage before we took the red clay off, that's when the crazy stuff started to happen. And this is where the gifting process really seemed to be like, oh, you're going to bring like, I mean, if you ever hear a Native American talk about bringing Sasquatch biologics home, they'll say, don't do it. Don't bring hair. Don't bring footprints. You don't have permission to do it. And by the way, you're bringing a hitchhiker home with you. Like, they're going to think, oh, you know, now we're all invited down to your house. You hear Mel Skahan talk about it in our videos on YouTube. Mel will talk about the moment he had to bring like a hair sample back into the woods because he got warned, you know, that you shouldn't be doing that. Well, we didn't care. You know, we're just crazy, right? And so we're bringing these giant plaster impressions. They're coated in hair. You know, there's black hair coming out of this plaster impression that are anomalous. And we start finding strange stuff in this locked shop around where these knee impressions were. Like objects had been added and moved, you know, inside this garage. And so, you know, were we being hoaxed? That's the first thing. Is if you've ever been hoaxed before, or anybody says that you're being hoaxed, then you're always looking for a way like, well, how did they get a key to get in here and do this stuff? And but then the stuff started happening to the degree where we started to see stuff, and we would have immediate interactions with things coming in and around this property at all times of day, and including these strange lights. We would see and record some very interesting sounds happening in and around this property that sounded like language to us. We'd all end up having experiences to one degree or another. The property owner, Daryl, ended up seeing a Sasquatch run behind his house through the power lines. I ended up seeing one at 4 a.m. behind my Jeep. You know, and this had never happened before. You know, like, I'm into this hard since 2006, and nothing like this has ever happened, not to this degree. But this is all going back to what Sally Walford told me in Valley of the Skookum, is that if you can find a place that will let you live there, these things, when they come to you, it's a whole different game. When they're coming down to your property, they're very comfortable after a period of time coming to you. And in fact, I think the whole family starts to come, because when they speak, when they have their utterances and they're using their terminal endings and they're getting close to a recorder and they're sniffing it and they're aspirating and sneezing blackberry juice underneath your vinyl awning, or they're picking up a 50-gallon drum and playing it like a bongo, and you see, you know, size 15 tracks, you know, devastating the gravel bar, which is impossible to do, to leave gravel impressions in, you know, in the substrate. Then you know that they're there, right? And so this place was just, it was full on with experiences, but by no means is this just a Bigfoot story? Because as many Sasquatch type things that were happening here, there was also this paranormal, supernatural poltergeist phenomena that was just as at home approaching us. And
Mhm.
this is the harder part for the apers to mess with, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, because they, yeah, that's quite an interesting story or encounter. I'm like Rob. I say story, but I really don't mean story. I mean
Yeah,
encounter.
no, they're encounter stories. There are stories, encounters from witnesses, experiencers, researchers. I've got a question for you, Tobe, that's going to blow the aper's mind. But I'm not going to. I'm going to save that because I have to do something for my mom real quick. But before I do that,
Okay. Okay.
you mentioned something about Skookum a couple times. What's your thoughts, really quick, on that full body impression? I think there was of the Bigfoot out in Skookum. Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you see that?
Yeah, it's called the Skookum cast. It was
Mhm.
cast. I believe it was in. It might have been in Washington, the southern Washington, along the Columbia River Gorge. It might have been northern Oregon near the Columbia River, some place called Skookum Valley or Skookum Meadow.
Right.
And I mean, I love what they did, right? Like this was like at the beginning of like the Olympic project and Tom Powell and Jeff
Yeah.
Meldrum and all these guys kind of like all
Oh,
together, like
and really
networking, waiting.
quickly,
Yeah.
Tom Powell, he is awesome. And my buddy, who's coming on Thursday at 1:00, Barry Littleton, loves Tom Powell. And I've been following Tom Powell since Barry told me, and he's fascinating. Sorry to
Yeah, there's
interrupt
no
you.
one. No, if you ever get a chance to have Tom on or
Mhm.
go to
Yeah,
a conference where Tom is speaking, he doesn't speak
yeah.
as much as he used to. There was a time where Tom and I would see each other 4 or 5 times a year at a conference or in the woods or something like that. Um, but it's really at Tom's behest, according to what I remember hearing from Tom, to leave these apples in the middle of a mud wallow to see if the Sasquatch would come in and leave some kind of track. And
Mhm.
so, for those who don't know what it is, you can look up the Skookum cast, and what they think they have is kind of like the profile view of like a Sasquatch leaning in on the dirt road, kind of bringing its arm around, trying to grab this apple without leaving feet impressions. Instead, it leads like its whole body profile. And it was, I mean, of course, we had the Skookum cast in the back of our mind when we were casting these
Mhm.
knee impressions because they used tons and tons of plaster in order to secure this giant body impression of something.
Right.
And so that's what they think they have. I don't know who has the original. I think the original actually is up here in Washington State. There may be a copy that Jeff has, but
Mhm.
yeah, I've never seen it in real life. I'd love to see, what this looks like in real life. Maybe I can. You just can't tell. Like our knee impressions are in a museum in Oak Ridge, Oregon. I had them like sitting in a milk shed out here in my farm for the last 5 years. Like this is ridiculous. They're going to get
Mhm.
damaged or something. So we just took them to a museum. These are where these things need to go. So public scrutiny and children, right? Like
Right.
children's imagination should set afire when they look at like a Bigfoot impression of some kind. Just like what the heck? Like, like scientific inquiry at a young age of these little citizen scientists, like, get them off of the Xbox, get them off of the
Right.
internet, get them to use their imagination, imagining how this stuff could be, well, how it could be hoaxed, right? Like this is one of the things I always think of, like, well, what would it take to hoax something like the Skookum cast? Or what
Right.
would it take to have all these professionals be wrong about it? And
Sure.
this is the fun of what we're doing right now, is to look at this stuff as far as like digging into it a little bit, layer by layer, so you can appreciate the real evidence when it comes into
Right.
view.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely appreciate that. And Chris, I got to do that thing for my right quick and continue
You're
on.
good. Yep, you're good. Go ahead. So Ron Riley, he says Skookum Cast is currently at North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon.
Is that Riley? I'd like to know if that's the original one.
Mhm.
because I might be the original, it might be the copy. If it is the original, that would be shocking to me. But
Mhm.
that's really cool if it is, because it's such a, when you have a museum,
Sure.
retail space is everything. And when
Mhm.
you have an exhibit, it's just like, well, how much floor space is it taking away from my retail?
Right.
So that would be an impressive gesture on Cliff's part to get that.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a quick question too for you. Lori asked, have you worked with Dr. Meldrum?
I did work with Dr. Meldrum on some footprints that we found out in Cottage Grove Lake. And just short of having him come out to look at them, it had started to rain. We ended up having Tom Powell and Cliff Barrickman and Autumn Williams come out, and there was like 122 footprints that were taken off of this Cottage Grove lake bed in 2012.
Oh, wow.
So Meldrum had some of those casts. Cliff had them for a while, and that was my experience working with Jeff, is over some footprints.
Cool. Good deal. So we talked briefly on like the Sierra Sounds and Ron Moorhead. What are your views on Mindspeak?
I heard you say that before you said it, because I'm so good at Mindspeak, Kristen. Yeah, so I haven't really had it happen to me to the degree where I know too much about it, other than the fact that I've been with people when they say it's happening.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting part, is the kind of people that saying really strange stuff in the woods, and these are like, licensed professionals in emergency response for the fire crew. These are trained observers. These are guys that have faced crisis as part of their work detail, professionals.
Yeah.
And I've been in spots in the woods with them where they said things like, they want me to leave. Or I'll never forget when my buddy Todd almost grabbed his pistol and threw it in the woods because he goes, they want me to get rid of my gun. Now, a redneck getting rid of his, 40 caliber and throwing it in the middle of the woods, it just doesn't happen, right? Like, these are very strange things for grown men hunters to say. And so I've been in the company of guys who said that before. So the Mindspeak thing, I tend to think is it's a directed energy of some kind, a focused delivery system, probably some kind of deliverable psychic ability that they have to focus a thought to Krista and not to BMR.
Sure.
Because how are they getting this stuff like infrasound directed at them and nobody in the field? Because if we're like operating with how sound waves work, they don't focus, they fan out. And so why is this not fanning out? How is this a focused delivery system or directed energy ability of some kind? This is conscious based, is I guess what I'm saying. This is like a conscious based phenomena. And this all goes back to the UFO issue, because this is where we're at with it right now, is that they're saying this is like, these teams of people called psionics, which are basically like having these Dr. Greer CE5 protocol to summon UFOs and pilot these UFOs. These are the kind of conversations that they're secretly having at the Pentagon right now, whether people know it or not. I don't know how far people are down the UFO rabbit hole. What I can tell you is that the apers in this community are infiltrated by people that probably have worked for 3-letter agencies for some, maybe they don't do it full time, but I believe that they work for 3-letter agencies, and they bring back information and report information from these conferences. And these guys know all about this stuff. They may act like apers all day long and talk about the flesh and blood during their PowerPoints. But privately, because I've asked them, the UFO stuff, they're more well-versed in the UFO stuff than anybody at MUFON even. Like, these are really well-searched UFO researchers. So why is that? I think it has something to do with the nature of the phenomena here, that this is an interdimensional phenomena, and they damn well know it. I mean, if you
Right.
listen to what's going on with the BFRO, they put out a press bulletin last year, the founder, Moneymaker, that they're going to start looking and talking about orbs. You know,
Wow.
this never happened before.
Right.
Like, you could never research or put on the BFRO report site any paranormal, supernatural,
No.
encounter of any kind. In
Right.
fact, if you were like one of the people that took them out in the field, they had a place to silo that information called the flats, and only like the people that are in the club got to read the weird stuff. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. Now you go to a BFRO expedition, and I kind of feel bad for these apers, because now you've got people showing up saying, well, your founder said that we may see orbs. We would like to go see the orbs tonight. And so that's the slippery slope we're at here, is that Mindspeak, consciousness, all that stuff is kind of out in the open now.
Yeah.
I do have a few things here. And briefly, I remember back in the day, the BFRO, I talked to several members who told me, Rob, they kind of left the group because a lot of the reports, if there was any paranormal involved, the BFRO would sanitize the report. It didn't fit the APER narrative. Okay, fine, that's all I'm saying on that. I'm not going to, it's not a slam show. But now that you're saying that, I'm glad to hear that. And I've got to say that Krista, see, you can tell we're great partners, because she stole my Mindspeak question. But I do got to piggyback on that. A lot of people, especially Tobe, you're also involved with the paranormal. There's a lot of people that are so intent on having an experience in the woods, a cryptid experience. They want to see Bigfoot. Rob, I experienced Mindspeak. So I've heard these encounters and stories from folks, and the further I've investigated things and the more experience I'm getting into this phenomena, and then I have to ask the question, are you sure that was a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot? How do you know that you were in an area that was full of nefarious activity or the paranormal activity?
Right.
And some entity is speaking to you, pretending to be a Bigfoot because he knows your intention is to seek out a Sasquatch.
Right.
Yeah. My girlfriend Erin calls them Wildergeist, and that's really what it sounds like. This is a wild poltergeist. You don't know the nature of all the beast here, but the one thing that we kind of all can confirm is that this is some kind of spirit, a land spirit of some kind, a trickster. And for that, you need to appreciate their sometimes bad sense of humor, because I think tripping men up on their own ego is probably one of the funnest little tricks that they seem to play. Like, the man that gets really caught up on this and thinks that they're going to bring back the evidence usually drives himself crazy and ends up only chasing shadows. That was one thing that I saw abundantly clear early on, is that the harder you chase after this, the worse off you are. And I've been in the company of these guys privately, and they are completely, they're battling depression over the fact that their lives aren't complete because it's always eluding them. And this is the nature of the phenomena, is it is elusive for a reason. This is not something that you just figure out. When this, let's say this phenomena actually proves itself into existence and everybody's okay with it being a phenomenon, it's not because we've done anything.
Sure.
They brought themselves to, this era of transparency and done it for us. We can't do this. And so it's really just kind of like a mindset. Now, I love collecting evidence. Like, if I've got plaster prints that I've collected, hairs that I've collected, and for me, it's a little bit like collecting baseball cards, or maybe, a photo album of some kind with memories. And so all these things are significant, and a lot of gifts I would never give away, but you can't get hung up on it. right?
Mhm.
This is, I think the less you chase after this, the better the evidence is going to get at, for you.
Sure.
And so that's where I'm at with it. Did I steer away from your question, BMR?
No, you answered my question. I mean, it's a tough question, and I will tell you this. I don't know if you've ever heard about my Bigfoot encounter that I experienced. I'm not going to tell you today, or many people who follow me have heard it ad nauseum. But I will say this though, when it comes to the mind speak or the telepathy, now this person could have heard my story before. I had a guest on maybe 2 years ago. But I always tell my encounter story the same. I don't miss a beat. It's always the same because I was there and it's what happened. Never ever told in my story, my encounter, did I mention a red barn? Because it, for me, there's no significance in bringing it up.
Mhm.
I'm telling enough about the beautiful backdrop of the Manistee National Forest, this, that, and the other, right? Red barn, yeah, I saw it. To me, again, no big deal. Who cares? I had a guest on it. Claim to speak with Bigfoot. Dogmen. She floored me. Midway through the show, she says, "Hey, Rob, Denali," I'm thinking Alaska, "meant you no harm." I'm like, "What the heck are you talking about? Denali, who's that? What's that? Meant me no harm." She goes, "I'm speaking with your Bigfoot. That's his name." Now, not to confuse you, Tobe, I had a very bad experience during my encounter. It was terrifying. Yeah, Denali is talking to me right now during my show. And if you watch the replay of my show, I literally fell out of my chair almost. I go, well, then I'm thinking in my head, well, she's probably heard my story, this, that, and the other. So maybe she's giving me something. Still a skeptic, but she mentioned the red barn. She goes,
Mhm.
yes. She says, Denali came from across from a portal from inside the red barn and meant you no harm. His children or the Denali's Sasquatch were playing outside of where you were fishing. The only reason I give that credibility is because I never, ever in my entire life telling my story, I've told it 1,000 times on many shows, including my own, never mentioned the red barn.
Mhm.
So that instance moving forward, I do believe that people do have these experiences. And the show we were doing was about Mindspeak. So today that gave me certification, if you will.
Mhm.
Now maybe she was very talented. I don't know, but I'm going to give her the credit.
So my thinking on that is, I don't doubt that she was talking to something, and that's where I have issues with the mind speak. I'm not doubting that people are talking to something. It's just, what are they talking to? As you said, like people want to talk to a Bigfoot so bad, then, the negative entities, you know, looking for a way in, and, you let them in by opening yourself, and they come in as a Bigfoot. Well, oh my gosh, I'm talking to Bigfoot, so you're going to let them in. That's just my thinking on it. Not saying I'm right. It's just my own personal opinion on Mindspeak.
Yeah, I agree with you, Krista, that we don't know the nature of a lot of this here, but it seems to be human-like. Ron talks about the Nephilim, talks about the fallen angels that
Mm-hmm.
impregnated women and created a hybrid species. I don't know if that's what we're dealing with here. It's certainly something I think about,
Yeah.
because this seems to be very hybrid like. But man, oh man, they have this sense of humor that does not strike me as something as nefarious. And I don't know why I haven't gotten Mindspeak. Maybe I'm just too dense to get it. But I do talk to people that do have it. Like there's a gal on a documentary named Tara Harris. Tara has kind of taken YouTube by storm on our Flash of Beauty channel. She's like 800,000 views like in 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
And she's just this simple little farm girl who happens to be a psychic, not interested in Bigfoot until I, invite her out to the Al Moon Lab. And once she had an experience with Sasquatch, they started to communicate with her. And, I was skeptical whether or not they were actually having Mindspeak with this little farm gal. But then when she started to say things to me that she couldn't possibly know, like you said, BMR, when she started to predict what was going to happen 15 minutes from then, and then start talking about, she calls them the Aeolin, which I'd never heard that before, but that is the name that I don't know if that's the individual or if that's what they want to be called as like a family unit. But there's been a lot of response on YouTube about other witnesses saying they call themselves Aeolin out here. I'd never even heard that term before. Have you guys ever heard Aeolin?
I have not.
No.
What was that?
Aeolin is what Tara is calling the Sasquatch out this way. So anyway, it's been interesting because I'm really skeptical about people's egos as it pertains to people that are mediums or people that are bringing in the spirit of something, like the people that are bringing in like the star seed to channel and everybody. I mean, 'cause we've got this jackass out here named Jay-Z Knight, this, new age spiritualist in the middle of the woods. And she's bringing in this, male alien to talk to all her cult members. And it's absolute BS. But I think she's actually talking to something, right? Like something is coming in her and taking hold of her because she knows stuff, right? And so I don't know what we're talking about here. It smacks me of some kind of witchcraft or something like that. Like, I don't know what's happening. Yeah. But I try to limit myself between working with people like that to some degree that aren't skeptical enough. Like if people think they know about what's going on with this phenomena, I'm immediately apprehensive. That's a big red flag. Just like, well, come to me and I'll tell you everything you need to know about Bigfoot. Right. Just like,
I agree.
It isn't happening for me, man.
Right. Wholeheartedly agree. Yep. Always try to debunk first, We do, the paranormal side of things, and we always go in with an open mind. However, you got to look for rational explanations of things. And I think that carries over into, looking up in the skies for UFOs or being out looking for Bigfoot,
Well, and that even goes for me. Like anybody listening to my crazy words here, don't take my word for any of this. Go find out for yourself. Do what Henry Franzoni said, do. Go find one of these scary places in the woods on Google Earth. Like look for a place called Devil's Lake or Devil's Ridge or Ghost Mountain or Booger Hill or Skookum, whatever. Like look into the history of what natives called Sasquatch and then go to that place. Look for the old maps too. You may not find it on Google Earth. You may have to go find an old map or an old atlas and go to those places and just wait. Right? Like don't bring all your gizmos with you. Just go, bring a case of beer, stay for the weekend, have a good time, but just keep an open mind that this stuff exists. And eventually, I don't care how dense you are, something is going to break loose to you're just like, well, that happened. Like we can all agree here, this happened, right?
Absolutely. Wow.
And I do agree with that. What were you to say, Krista?
Oh, go ahead. I have more questions.
Yeah, you have questions. I'm not. Please, you ask them. In fact, you go ahead and ask because my question is a little more convoluted than probably yours.
Well, mine's on a different subject. So if yours is still on this, go for it.
Well, my quick question was, I wanted to ask, we can maybe save it towards the end. I want to ask Tobe about one of his weirdest experiences while out in the field that made you question what you're doing. So maybe that could be for last.
I don't know. However you want to do it.
Well, I'll ask you, what are your thoughts on like dogmen and other cryptid creatures out there?
Yeah, of course the dog. Yeah. Yes, leave it up to Krista.
I'm
Thank
all
you,
about
Krista.
dogmen.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Krista.
So we have some interesting photos. We have some interesting sounds from the Al Moon Lab that don't sound and do not look like Bigfoot. You know, that to me they smack of being a blob squatch as far as photographic evidence. The sound that we could have played tonight, in particular, of what sounds like a werewolf in the woods. I mean, that's what you think of. You think of like the howling. You think of Werewolf in London.
Mm-hmm.
If this is a Bigfoot, it's unlike any Bigfoot call I've ever heard. It kind of starts off like the wind, and then it turns into this crazy rip roar. Now, I've talked to people that have seen Dogmen. There's some incredible.
Tobe,
yeah.
Was that included in the audio you sent me?
I don't think the one I'm describing here was, so no harm, no foul. But people, if they're interested in it, all these things that I'm talking about, you can pick up in my book, The Al Moon Lab, A Paranormal Experiment. It's like $9, $10 on Amazon. It has QR codes embedded in it. So as you read, you can actually scan your phone and it'll go to the audio file of what I'm describing. So if people want to do that, they can. But I used to do a podcast and I talked to a witness, pretty reluctant witness. She went by Lisa Lycan. That was her code name.
No.
Good name, right? And lycanthropy or lichens are werewolves.
Right.
Now, she was a very believable. I had her in the shadows. She wouldn't come out in the public. But we did a witness. We did a 3D rendering, actually, and made her a 3D replica of what she saw. I hired a 3D artist, and he did like a sculpt as she was describing it online with us. And so he's adding and subtracting like the face and the jowls. Well, she ended up describing as a little kid being kind of babysat by a dog girl named Blondie. Now, as crazy as that sounds, her story doesn't come off crazy at all. Like she reminds me of every Bigfoot witness I've ever talked to. Very level-headed, very straightforward. This is like a supernatural encounter with this being named Blondie. You know, razor sharp teeth, prepubescent, upright canine, kind of looks like Anubis. And she nicknamed this dog Blondie. And it turns out that like the mother, the father, her sister kind of all knew about this experience with this canine, upright canine. And this gets into a whole different type of activity that people describe as far as like Dogman being evil, right? Because when we think of skinwalkers, we think of like, a First Nations person that is into necromancy or something like that and turns into like, an evil spirit of a dog. But this is not always the case. Like people sometimes have these experiences with an upright canine or a werewolf, for lack of really a better word, that is a lot like a Bigfoot encounter.
Right. Interesting.
But not for the most part. Like most of these encounters with Dogman are no bueno. Like I don't want to have a Dogman encounter. I don't ever want to deal with it. If it's anything like people describe, like this, there's this episode of, what was that called? Paranormal Witness. There was this old show called Paranormal Witness where all these werewolves come into this farmhouse and the husband and wife are like barricading themselves with their daughter. And it's all super like believable, but it sounds just like they're being attacked by monsters. This is not a Bigfoot thing. Yeah,
absolutely. So, before BMR's computer went to crap.
Yes, really quickly, everybody. Tobe sent me some great audio.
I have his pictures, what I'm trying to say. I did download the pictures.
Okay.
Oh, Krista.
Cool. Thank you, because everybody coming on in, I'm using my phone. Yes, my phone. I got to get a new computer. I ordered one. It should be coming Thursday. I've never done this on the phone, so it's kind of weird for me. So yes, Tobe provided me a whole bunch of great stuff.
Well, I have
that
3 pictures
I lost.
that you sent me. 3 pictures.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
if you wouldn't mind, is if now's a good time, I'd like
Tonight,
to.
it's a great time.
Okay. So here's the first one.
Well, there it is. What do you say about that? That's known as the hockey puck to my girlfriend and I. This is one of those photographs that you can't really explain. This was taken in the town of Port Orchard on our old 5 acres, and this is in one of the areas where we would have the phenomena present itself. Strange stuff would show up as far as photographic evidence. On this occasion, we're actually doing a night sit in lawn chairs on a summer night. And as we're sitting there with like a single Coleman lantern, I like natural lanterns more so than I like headlamps and LEDs. So we have a little lantern burning on a stem behind us here. And at one point, a stick comes in and lands at our feet. And that's when I started to get my phone raised up. And when I brought my phone up, that light phenomena, whatever that was, I could see it kind of come in front of the phone. I couldn't see it with my eyes. I don't believe that to be a bug. It's
Neither.
It has a very weird shape to it, but what is that? We don't really know. It's one of those mystery lights.
Well, I'm going to tell you why I believe it's legit. And I am no orb expert. I'm not an expert on anything. It's just been from my past experiences with pictures and orbs and things like that. Do you see how it has a tail? Like it's leaving something there. Like I believe like true, legit orb pictures like have a tail or they have a trace. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're leaving a trail, and that one is. Because if you see a lot of like the dust orbs or things like that, they don't.
Yeah, it seems to be moving upwards, and it seems to almost have an edge to it, like a cylinder of some kind. Now, I don't know what that could have been. Maybe that's a spirit. Maybe that's a Bigfoot, if it's anomalous at all. We did see things on that property, things that I'll never forget with my own eyes. And we had guests stay the night at our house that saw stuff with their own eyes. So it wasn't just photographic evidence. We had the phenomena happening at this house. This was different than the Al Moon Lab. This was after I moved away from it back up to Washington with a Bigfoot witness by the name of Erin. And at her 5 acres that I moved into, the phenomena had kind of already established itself there, mainly Bigfoot stuff. But there was this hitchhiker effect. When everybody kind of knows what that is, that's when the phenomena follows you from one property to the next.
Right.
And this is what seemed to happen to me is when I left Cottage Grove and moved 6 hours north, this phenomena followed me up. And it let me know, just like, we're not done yet. Now, it faded over time, mainly during the pandemic is when things really died down. And I don't know why that was, but things did die down. And eventually we left that area. And now it's kind of been dry out in this area. We haven't had a lot happen at this house.
Krista, really quickly, do you have another question, Krista? Or another picture?
I got 2 more.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Take your time.
That one.
Yeah, so this is near the Al Moon Lab. This is in the early stages of getting to know this property. And so I was doing these live shows at a bar. I still do live shows at a bar once a month on the paranormal.
Great.
And so we get together on a weekend or weekday with, a couple of patrons there having some PBRs and appetizers. And we talk about the paranormal, bring witnesses up. But afterwards, after we sober up, we all go out in the woods and we see if we can stir up activity. Cool. This was a photograph taken by Daryl Adams, the property owner of the Al Moon Lab. And we were in the deep woods, what is known as the Bohemia Wilderness, at a gold mining claim called Mineral Camp. Way out, no cell phone signal, You wouldn't want to get your car stuck there, kind of deal.
Mhm.
And we walked in the woods maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and we had that gal with us that was the psychic, and she was saying, I feel like there's a phenomena happening across that old trail bridge. Now there are no street lights, there's no penetrating the canopy from where she was pointing. It was just dark. And that's a photograph that Daryl Adams took of what appears to be a shaft of light opening up. It kind of has this purpley blue color to it. It should not exist for where this photograph was taken here.
Wow.
And the interesting thing about it is that it seems to be coming out at an angle upwards, as though this light is kind of like peeking through and traveling up, which doesn't make a lot of sense at all. And this is what witnesses describe seeing. We talked earlier about Adam Davies. I don't want to tell Adam's story for him, but Adam is a pretty well-known cryptozoologist and had a pretty amazing encounter out in southern Oregon. He also described seeing what looked like a shaft of light, in this case a red light, open up in pure darkness, and saw these two beings along with his buddy John Carlson and Matt Johnson.
Right.
These are incredible stories of people that aren't into the paranormal,
Sure.
that are suddenly thrusted into this world of like, oh my gosh, what does this have to do with Bigfoot?
Right.
And so this is, perhaps a trick of the camera. I don't believe it is, but a strange shot near the Almoon Lab.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting picture. One more here.
Yeah. Well, this is a strange one. All right. This is at the Almoon Lab in front of the pear tree. And so attached to the pear tree, occasionally Daryl would put his game camera to see if we could catch anything at all. And to the right would be where my little camper trailer is. And on 3 different frames on this camera, this box of light with a rod of light came from the left to the right and glided in front of this pear tree. We have no idea what this phenomena could be. You're looking at a reverse negative of it right now. And, we talked earlier about Ron Moorhead's sighting. Ron and his girlfriend or his wife, Carrie, saw a lightsaber or a rod of light also in the Sierras. It's one of the lesser known described kind of like UFOs seen, but this was maybe only like 5 feet off the ground, and maybe it was like 1.5 feet long.
Wow.
Yeah, very strange, and only 3 different shots of it, no video.
Yeah, well, at first I seen it, I thought maybe it was some sort of a drone or something.
Yeah, well, this was what the neighbors were saying that they were seeing was some kind of drone. And this is like the catch-all phrase for UFOs now.
Right.
And so that if that was a drone, it did it without propellers, and it seemed to have, a smaller little drone connected to it.
Yeah, that's really, really cool picture. Very cool.
You really quickly, those are awesome pictures, fascinating, and really quickly, Krista, before we, before the show shuts down. Do you think all the people I can't get it left any donations or memberships?
Yeah.
Give them a quick thanks since everyone's still in the chat room.
Yes,
we do
absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you to Walter. Thank you, Scott, for the memberships. Thank you, Lori. And thank you, Josh. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody for that. Not expected, but always appreciated. Love each and every single one of you in the chat. And also the people that are watching around the world that do not participate in chat, because you do help drive the show as well. And I love you just as equally. But we have 100 people in chat. What we did, and there is, I can do this now. I got it. I have my little stupid laptop from 2000. 367 watching live around the world. Thank you. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channels. And of course, Tobe is with Jill, and that's Beauty. I'm sorry,
Flash of Beauty.
Flash of Beauty on YouTube. Fascinating, great show. Love it. Just discovered Jill 6 months ago, whenever. Awesome show. Subscribe to her on YouTube. And before we add Tobe, I'll have you promote yourself. Before we close it down, weirdest experience. We got about 10 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's see here. One of the strangest things that we would find was two different things here we'll get into. One was a gift. We talked earlier about gifting. Now, these gifts would show up in locked houses. There would be petrified wood that would be set in the middle of my sink. In my locked trailer, there was a 12-inch boulder or rock set in the middle of the Persian rug. Locked cars would get white feathers set on top of the steering wheel. All those things we took as some kind of good omen, right, or gift. And a lot of times they were apports. They would just appear. Now there would be a sound associated sometimes with these deliveries of strange objects, which we didn't really get into, but we had like 1,400 hours worth of audio, and a lot of these strange sounds of things that sound like snapping, popping, or breaking also were incidents where we would get these extraordinary gifts, and they were about things that we had just spoken about. And so, for example, we were looking for a taxidermied rabbit for an art exhibit that I was creating. And I thought, well, I'll go on eBay or I'll go to like a taxidermist and I'll just get a little cotton-tailed taxidermied rabbit and we'll include that in this art exhibit. Well, we were having these conversations and we were already getting gifts, apports about things we had just discussed. Like I would be talking about needing a new cell phone, and the next day under the oar of my boat, there would be a cell phone hidden underneath the oar of my boat. And it had, again, this muddy patina. I would hang up Christmas lights around the awning of my trailer, and underneath the oar of my boat would be an antique Christmas ball, like from the 1950s. So when we asked for, we didn't ask for a rabbit. When I went looking for a rabbit, I came home around 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and there was this rabbit sitting in front of my trailer. And it was about 95 degrees out, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and this rabbit had no predation marks on it, had no bugs on it. And that's impossible in the heat like that. Like when you have fresh roadkill, some bugs are coming, right? And this thing barely was having a glaze over its eyes. And it was laying right near the front of my trailer. And we were recording everything. So there's... in my book, you'll see me open up my phone and walk up to this rabbit, and on the side of its head is a rock, as though something has penetrated the skull of this rabbit with a little tiny stone. Now, that was inexplicable to me. This came on the tails of a lot of strange gifts that were given to us over things we had recently talked about, but that was like, this was a different kind of like, how do I take this, right?
Right.
Like, this is dead. This is like this is maybe not good.
Right.
And so I was just like, we were kind of joking about it, just like, oh my gosh, that's not a lucky rabbit. And, Daryl looks at me and goes, well, thank God it's not a snake. You hate snakes. Well, what do you think happened to me 3 days later? In the exact same spot, after work, in the exact same location where that rabbit was a decapitated snake. And that snake was so fresh that it had a slight wiggle on the tail. So whatever had killed that did it right when I was coming around, you know what I mean? Like, and it was a sixth sense of humor. Like, it knew that would get my attention. I just can't stand snakes. And there's so many examples of weird moments like that where you just can't pass them off anymore, because these are preceded by greasy handprints that you find sliding over, giant, twice the size of my handprint, sliding with red hair on this greasy, oily residue that the handprints would leave behind, or these, giant footprints penetrated down into the gravel. So, wow. We had to draw some lines periodically, and as far as like the weirdness, that one, that was a pretty weird one.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. Wow.
Yeah. That is weird.
Mm-hmm. Sure. We didn't even get to your paranormal talk because you've had a lot of paranormal encounters and experiences too. So,
yeah, there's always part 2, and I'll be gracious enough for you. I'll be gracious enough for you, Krista. You can have Tobe on. Talk about part 2.
That's what I was hitting at. I'll do part 2 on Blondes and
Yeah,
Beatles.
I mean, I could go 2 and 3 hours, but Tobe's probably got to get up in the morning. Krista does, and I got to get up. I got to go to the doctor in the morning. Tobe, man, where can we find you? And what I need you to do, unfortunately, when I get my computer, give me all your links, promote yourself. I'll post it in this show. But briefly tell our audience where they can find you, your books. I'll be on Amazon. They at Barnes & Noble. What's going on?
Yeah. So if anybody wants to follow up on any of this madness, you can do it over at YouTube at A Flash of Beauty Bigfoot Revealed. A Flash of Beauty Bigfoot Revealed. We have tons of videos on there. It's kind of my only YouTube presence right now. We have a new show that's premiering on Valentine's Day. It's called Olympic Strange Days. It's a complimentary channel to A Flash of Beauty. That's my channel. Starts on Valentine's Day.
Awesome.
It's your chance to get out in the woods with me here and talk to people that are not only having strange paranormal encounters, but I want to talk to the quirky. I want to talk to the people that, call this strange peninsula their home. So, I've got interviews coming up we have the largest mastodon dig out here in Sequim, Washington, talking to the last surviving widow that dug up these woolly mammoth bone and mastodon bones. Lots of different stuff going on. Check it out. And that's over at A Flash of Beauty.
Yep. And I just shared the link, and it's also, for those of you, it's in the description of the show. I put it in there when I created the show. So
I don't know what I do without you, Krista.
I know, right? Like, you need to stop spilling things on your computer. Let's just be honest and tell everybody the truth.
Now you're telling everybody what happened to my computer now? Yes, I did it myself. $1,300 later, I got to get a new computer now.
Oh, no.
I had to tell you, Rob.
Not that much. I'm pretty, I found a good deal on something. But yeah, I did. I spilled something on my tower and it fried the system.
Oh, and I should mention that Voices in the Wilderness will be coming out in the fall of 2025, along with Flash of Beauty 3. Flash of Beauty 3 is dedicated to the First Nations story. It's only First Nations that are going to be the witnesses. Don't have a working title, Flash of Beauty 3, but Voices in the Wilderness, that's that's going to be a real game changer as far as what people think they know about the Sierra Sounds. It's more than sounds, folks, and we get into it.
That's awesome. I look forward to it. Seriously, you guys do great work. You really do, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that channel since I got turned on to it by actually Krista when I saw her show, and so many great people out there. You can't see them all. You can't find them all. So it's always that was a gem for me, for sure. And Jill did a great job on that show. She's awesome. Tobe, you're awesome.
On our show a couple times.
Absolutely. And fantastic channel. Tobe, you're a fantastic guest. We'll have to have you back down the road every once in a while. Don't be a stranger.
And remember, open invitation to the conference.
The conference,
thank you, guys.
Come on down.
Yeah.
If you're not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Sure.
Thanks to everybody who came in today. If you're new here, please subscribe to BMR, Krista, Tex, and the rest of the gang, right? Hit that like button on your way out. And, I have no control of the controls. So, Krista, it's up to you to sign us off.
All right. I am going to do that. So, you don't have an extra, do you? Or do you? Do you have an extra?
I don't. You can play the conference thing if you want. What the hell?
Okay. I'll play the conference thing again.
Promote that one more time. Thank you, Tobe.
All right. Bye, guys.
Everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
This is the future. Evolution. This is the future.